let's get straight to our next guest. It's Councillor Thomas Kerr. He's a Reform UK councillor in Glasgow, which has been named as Britain's capital of asylum seekers. Very good afternoon to you, Thomas.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. I have to say, these figures are absolutely extraordinary. I mean, local officials and indeed local people basically saying, we have had enough, this isn't going to work for us anymore, saying that Glasgow is facing untenable pressure due to the UK's asylum system. The council's homelessness convener has warned that specifically. But 4,000 asylum seekers were sent by the Home Office to the city. Hundreds of refugees with leave to remain travelled there, basically saying we're homeless. And the Glasgow region, the Glasgow government local government is basically having to deal with this, and indeed the local community. Tell us first of all what the financial pressure is, and then we'll move on to the other pressures.
Well, to put it into context for everybody, Julia, we have 6,735 beds in Glasgow to house homeless people right now. 4,100 of those currently have asylum seekers. This city has declared a housing emergency almost a year and a half ago, and it's not just because of the pressures we're facing from asylum seekers, it's because we have a homelessness epidemic in the city as well. But because of Scottish law, what's happening is a lot of people who have been put up here because of the fact that Glasgow's a dispersal city, and with the leave to remain, they know they can come to Glasgow, say that they're homeless, and Scottish law means that they automatically are housed. It means that Glasgow's becoming a real hub for people who are then coming to Scotland to try and make sure they're claiming asylum.
Well, just clarifying, so why did the Home Office decide to send a lot of people to Glasgow, and do they provide funding for those people? Because we're told this costs the country a fortune. We're spending billions, millions every day and billions every year providing this accommodation for asylum seekers. Does it come out of a central fund? Does it have to come out of local council funding? Where do you get the money from, if at all?
It's a historical thing that Glasgow signed up to be a dispersal city years ago. As you'll know,
that
Julia,
worked out well for you.
Well, Glasgow has a history of being a very left-wing city, which is part of the problem, and a lot of these politicians inside the building I'm in now live in a different planet and think that this was a good idea because it makes them sound good to people and their voter base rather than actually looking at common sense. In terms of funding, we do get some funding from the Home Office, but it's nowhere near as much as what we need to try and make sure that we're able to accommodate the number of asylum seekers that's coming in. The administration has a very clear view here, though. They could end the fact that Glasgow is a dispersal city. We can turn to the UK government and say enough is enough.
We're done.
The fact that it's a nationalist councillor who is now openly saying that, I think shows you how serious it's became in Glasgow. It's not a reform politician, it's not somebody on the right like me that's now saying this. It's people who see themselves as woke lefties who are fighting for it.
The reality check of it actually happening. And of course we saw that in America, didn't we? We mentioned it a bit earlier on the show, when the Democrats were sort of saying, oh, how awful, how badly these people are being treated. They're coming in over the borders, immigrants from Mexico and South America and wherever around the world. And the likes of Ron DeSantis, the Republican governor of Florida, basically just put them on buses and sent them up to Martha's Vineyard and other places where the rich left-leaning Democrats live. Funnily enough, they didn't like it when it happened to their local communities.
There's a lot that's coming home to roost for a lot of the politicians who have made terrible decisions over the past, God knows, 20 odd years in this city. Labour and SNP politicians who have made horrible decisions, and there's a lot of facts coming home to roost that they're unhappy with when the reality starts up, and communities like mine in the East End of Glasgow are now saying enough is enough. I mean, we had a by-election a couple of weeks ago and Reform got 24% of the vote there. That's because people are sick, fed up. It's not because everybody's all now turned to the right. It's because they're fed up and their community's been overtaken. And I think a lot of these politicians are realising that.
We've seen that across the UK, we've seen it across Europe, we've seen it in Ireland as well. In terms of the impact on local communities, we know this is one of the things that, again, people say, well, people have to live somewhere, but of course, it's happened in Ireland as well, but in lots of places in England and in Scotland, asylum seekers being housed in a hostel, often, few hundred people put somewhere in a tiny town, massively dwarfing local population, often in hotels, ruining the tourism in the local area because people got nowhere to stay, people's weddings being cancelled and the like. And of course, they're not spending money in local restaurants and local tourist shops and things, so that has an impact on jobs. But there's also that impact of having a whole bunch of young men with nothing to do all day suddenly out and about on the streets. And that is certainly a concern, particularly for young women who are bearing the brunt of this. And loads of women have said this to me, and it's really well documented across Europe as well. The attitude of many of the young men who coming from countries where women are treated as second-class citizens, where a woman who's not covered up is treated as a sex object, and the harassment of young women and the crimes against young women have skyrocketed. Have you seen that problem in Glasgow?
We have. I actually got myself reported to the SNP's new hate crime legislation
Course you
because I
did.
spoke about this. One of the SNP councillors, ironically, the convener who's now complaining, was the one who had reported me to the police because he wasn't happy with the fact I said there has been a rise in stalking, assaults, and huge crime inside the city centre. A lot of young women feel extremely unsafe, and they are reporting back that the predominantly, now this isn't just everybody, there's obviously people who are from different cultures who are doing this as well. The dominance of this is young men who have travelled up here from asylums, who are claiming to be asylum seekers, and that is a big issue. It's having a massive impact in our local communities, and we have an epidemic going over in Glasgow right now that I've spoke about today, about play parks, where there's people taking photographs of children in play parks across the west of Scotland.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me. If it was my kid.
Right now in Scottish legislation, that's actually not against the law. It's crazy that they can do this, and it's not against the law to take a photograph of someone else's kid in a public play park. This is madness. But that's where we sit now in Scotland. It's absolutely crazy.
Just extraordinary, isn't it? Do you think that you've got the public on your side again, regardless of people's political affiliation? There are a lot of people, they might talk the talk, but actually they'll be saying to their daughters, be careful when you're in town because of this one. Because when the reality bites everybody, and everyone's aware of it. Do you think everyone's still pretending they're not noticing the problem, but they really are?
You know what? I think in Glasgow you're seeing a massive switch around of people who are now finding their voice and being very, very vocal about this. It is scaring politicians inside the city chambers who have for a long time tried to keep these issues hidden and don't let the public talk about it.
And labelling someone as someone who's committing a hate crime by pointing out actual crime statistics.
I mean, before I came on to speak to you, Julia, we have a full council meeting that's taking place where they had a question digged at me, and every one of the politicians clapped to say they welcome refugees and asylum seekers as they tried to point it down at me. And my reaction is, look, the people of Glasgow are with me. The establishment might not be with me, but the people of Glasgow are, because they're sick, fed up with their city being treated the way it is. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, the only thing is, just finally, what's going to be done about it? Because at the end of the day, these people are in the country. People say, well, they've got to live somewhere. What are the options?
Well, I think there's three options that the administration in Glasgow can do. The first one is by saying to the UK government, we can't be a dispersal city any longer. We have to have our fair share going across Scotland, not just to Glasgow. I think the administration here locally can streamline planning applications to make sure we're building more homes, because that's part of the big issue that we have. Investors don't see Scotland as an attractive place to invest, so they don't want to build homes. And lastly, that the Scottish government has to change the fact that in Scotland, if you're an asylum seeker or you claim to be an asylum seeker or a refugee, you're automatically kicked at the top of housing lists.
Over and above local people, indeed.
So it makes a circumstance where loads of people are coming up to Scotland from England because they know they can abuse the system. So those three things are very, very simple. The Scottish government could do very quickly to tackle this issue in Scotland.
Very interesting. Councillor Thomas Kerr, Reform UK Council in Glasgow, thank you very much. If you're wondering, obviously we can't talk to local councillors who are standing in local elections, but the local elections in Scotland aren't until 2027, which is why we can talk to a local councillor from that part of our great country. Philip Ingram, I mean, these numbers are extraordinary. These are political decisions by the national government and by the local city government. The reality, the impact is felt by people on the street.
Well, very much so, and I think he very articulately put across the change in attitudes that people have got, and that's but how out of touch those that are in positions of power are with the people on the street, and that's not a good position to be in, because that's going to turn into more protests and worse. It'll be fascinating to see.
Forget protests, young women being sexually assaulted and stalked. I mean, let's worry about the really important stuff. Not being unpopular at a local dinner party.